Thank you for joining us today. This is the fifth webinar in our Fundraising in a Pandemic series. This is migrating multiple events to virtual environments. And just to remind everyone, we are recording the webinar and we'll send a follow-up email on Monday with links to the webinar recording. Libby's agreed to share her slideshow with everyone. We'll have a presentation summary, which in this case will be a summary about the different fundraisers that Libby's going to share with us today, kind of what they looked like in person, and then what they looked like transition to a virtual environment. We'll also share transcripts of the chat and the Q&A, and everyone will get a certificate for attending today. Just a little bit about the Zoom controls. We're going to ask you to use the chat to introduce yourself as you've been doing. That's going to be where we're going to share links and resources with the group. So as Libby is talking about different things she's used, I'm going to post those links in the chat room. That way they'll be captured in the transcript, and you'll be able to like click on them and pull them up and kind of follow along or check them out as Libby's talking about them. And if you have questions for the other participants, if somebody says something in the chat that kind of interests you and you want to connect with them, that's what we'll use the chat for. If you have questions for Libby about her various fundraising events and how she migrated them to a virtual environment, we're going to ask that you use the Q&A functionality to ask those questions. That just helps us kind of keep track of which questions have been answered so that we make sure that everybody gets an answer to the question that they asked. And Libby's agreed that if we don't get to all the questions by the top of the hour, to stick around and make sure that everyone's questions get answered. Upcoming webinars. So we've got another webinar in this series coming up in May, Blind Date with a Book. This has been this will be the sixth one in the Fundraising in a Pandemic series of webinars, and those have been sponsored by Lynn Reed. We also have a webinar coming up on April 8th, Ideas from the Field. It's about a writing technique, Foursquare writing. And we've got some Learn and Share webinars that are for our Pro Literacy members. These are on program management. You see the topics there. And we're about to launch a research series. So if you want to check out our upcoming schedule, you can go to proliteracy.org/webinars. And the ones that we have scheduled, you'll see descriptions and the registration links in those in the calendar there. You'll also, because you're attending this webinar, you'll be on our mailing list and we'll be able to kind of keep an eye out for announcements. All right, I think that's everything I have. So I'm going to turn things over to Libby Wahlstrom. She's the Development Director for the Literacy Center of West Michigan in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And you see their web address there, and I'm going to post that into the chat. So Libby, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to you.
Great, thanks, Todd. Let's see if this works as it's supposed to. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. So, really excited to be here. Thanks to Todd for the introduction. My name is Libby Wahlstrom. I'm the Development Director at the Literacy Center of West Michigan. I have been, I was just saying to Todd, I've been fundraising now for about 16 years, so my entire career, and have spent the last almost 9 years at the Literacy Center. So have had a lot of experience in this literacy world, and I'm really excited to talk with you all and share with some like-minded folks about some of my experience. So just for a little context, let's see if I can advance the slide. There we go. Okay. Just for a little context, the Literacy Center is 35 years old. We started as a small organization in the public library. You can see those great 80s haircuts in the picture on the left, and started as the Kent County Literacy Council. And since then, we've grown to be one of the biggest community-based literacy organizations in the area. So we are instructing about 730 learners annually. We have 3 direct service programs. So we do one-on-one tutoring, we do workplace focused classes, and we're also in local businesses, and we do family literacy classes. So we have a budget of about 1.4 million and about 12 staff members, permanent staff members, and then, obviously a ton of volunteers and a lot of instructors who help us teach the classes. So my plan today and what I've been charged with is to talk to you a bit about the Literacy Center's events. So I'm going to go kind of chronologically. We've actually done 2 virtual Spellbrations now and 1 wine and words. So our first virtual Spellabration was in June of 2020. Spellabration is a spring gala event. So we usually have a sit-down dinner. We have 3 honorees every year. We do a champion of literacy, a volunteer of the year, and an award for community engagement. So we usually see about 350 guests for our in-person event. This is the 28th annual, so it's been happening for quite a while. Some of the fun elements that we really enjoy about the event is we have a cocktail hour with a local distillery that provides great drinks for everybody in advance of the event. We get people well liquored up before the event begins, which makes the other element really fun. We play a Scrabble game at the table. So each table gets about 10 Scrabble tiles and they get to make a word as a table. And whoever has the most points gets gift cards. So we also sell the high level tiles. So some of those really desirable ones. We actually have a major donor who every year will purchase or try to purchase all of those high level ones, which is great. We raise good money and he always wins. So everybody's happy. The event raises about $130,000 to $145,000 for the organization. So then we do Wine and Words, which is a fall event and kind of a completely different focus. We've been doing this for about 14 years, and it is a house party in the fall at one of our major donors' homes. So he has opened up his home for the last almost 9 years now for this event. We usually have about 100 to 150 guests mingling, so you can tell what the size of the home is with that number of people. We do wine, we do appetizers, we have word games set up around the house. So it's much more of a networking kind of individual focused event rather than a sit-down gala. And it raises about $35,000 for the organization. So combined, our events make up about $12,000 or 12% of the organization's revenue. So obviously 2020 hit us all pretty intensely. So our event, our Spellebration, was originally scheduled for March 26th of 2020. So right in the heart of the COVID shutdowns, lucky us. So we decided March 12 that we were going to postpone the event. We thought, no big deal. By June 4, we will be happy to be back in person. Not a problem, won't be an issue. Obviously, that didn't happen. And so by the end of March, we knew we were gonna have to do something different. And I will be the first to admit, I was the first person that said, you know what, we might as well just cancel the event. We did most of our fundraising, had been done in advance with sponsorships. And I said, you know what, this is my suggestion that we just cancel it. And we took that idea to the board, who said, no, you know what, let's try a virtual event. which was all well and good. You know, we were happy to do that. And I said to them, well, what does that look like? And they said, we have absolutely no idea, but you get to figure it out. So kind of that classic board staff back and forth. So I will admit I spent the next 2 to 3 weeks just immersing myself in every virtual event I could find, every webinar, every article about how do you do virtual events. And it was still pretty new. I mean, this was early April of 2020. So it's not like anybody had really figured it out yet. I'm not sure we still have, but it was still pretty early on. So after all of that, we kind of set our goals of what we really wanted in terms of what we had kind of watched, what we knew was kind of best practice. So as an organization, you know, we knew we wanted to go live. We knew we wanted it to be a live event. We had seen some pre-recorded events and they just weren't the same. You know, they just didn't have that kind of dynamic conversational feeling. And to kind of go along with that, we knew we wanted it to be engaging. We didn't want to just talk at people for, you know, an extended period of time. So we knew we wanted to find ways to make it interesting and engaging for the people watching. We wanted to keep some similar elements from our in-person event. So some of those fun things that we had done, particularly for Spellabration, you know, how do we translate that into a virtual arena? And for us, one of the big things, and maybe this doesn't seem so big for everybody else, but we wanted to have hosts, people on screen that were affiliated with the Literacy Center. So we had seen some virtual events where TV personalities in town, like news people, had kind of begun transitioning into this world of hosting virtual events, which is all well and good. They're great on camera, but they are not necessarily, they don't necessarily have the heart for the mission, and we knew we really wanted that. So that's kind of the setup that we did as we were looking at the virtual event experience. So then we kind of took that and moved it into our virtual Spellabration. So we actually kept that June 4 date, the one that we had thought, oh, no problem, we'll be in person. So we decided to go virtual on June 4 because we had already kind of set that date with all of our sponsors and guests in advance. We knew we wanted to stream the event live on Facebook so that everyone could attend. It was a link that was accessible to everyone. We had tutors attending. We wanted some, you know, we wanted learners to be able to access it. We actually had a couple of classes that were going on at that night virtually, and so they attended, which was really fun. I used the Be Live platform, which worked for us at the time. Gave us the option of pulling in multiple people from different places and streaming it onto Facebook. We wanted to keep some of our favorite elements, obviously, that I said of the in-person event. So we did a cocktail hour, quote unquote, about 15 minutes before the event started. We went live with some photos of the Literacy Center and the work over the past year. And then we also included like how to make a cocktail video from our partners at Lawn Road Distillers. So we still got to kind of incorporate some of that Lawn Road Distillery cocktail hour part of the in-person event. And I will tell you, it also gave us a great chance to go live early, which was really my whole goal, was to test the technology to make sure, in like a very benign way, to make sure that we were live when we thought we were. So I highly recommend doing that. And then we did the Scrabble game. So my colleague, we were kind of brainstorming, like, how do we do this Scrabble game virtually? And my colleague came up with the idea of putting Scrabble tiles on the postcard invitation that we sent to everybody. So we did a postcard to say, like, hey, the event is going virtual. Essentially, it's what you see on the screen here. You know, play the Scrabble game. And so we included tiles, and we did 5 different versions of the postcard with 5 different sets of tiles. And then people could play the game during the live event by putting their word in the chat box. So it also encouraged people to attend the live event. We knew that we wanted the event to be fast-paced. We wanted to keep it engaging, like I said earlier. We wanted it to be brief, so we kept it to 30 minutes, and we had a pretty hard stop and did a great job, I think, of keeping it to that timeline, because everyone sits on Zoom all day, especially kind of early on in the pandemic. We were like, nobody wants to sit all night in front of a screen and just watch. So We wanted to really keep it brief. And like with everything, we wanted it to be really mission forward. We had seen some that were great virtual events, but you left kind of thinking like, what do they do again? What is their mission? So we didn't want to run into that problem. And then we postponed our honoree celebration until 2021 because we thought, oh, hey, we'll absolutely be back in person in 2021. There's just no question that we will be able to do an in-person 2021 event. So that was our naivete again last June, but we were able to postpone that celebration. So then the other thing that we really worked on was kind of making sure that the experience was different for a virtual event. We really recognized that the way people were going to engage in this virtual event was different than the way people would engage in an in-person event. And I have to say I learned this early on when I started working on the script. And so I had taken essentially our in-person event script and kind of tweaked it a little bit, taken out some things, changed it around just a bit. And then when we were doing the dress rehearsal, we realized that was just absolutely not the right way to go about it. Nobody wants to listen to a virtual talking head because in a in-person event, you have somebody come up on stage, give a 5-minute speech or a 10-minute speech and then sit down. And that just does not work virtually. Nobody wants to listen to that. So instead, we really changed it around. So Wendy Falb on the left on this picture is our executive director. And she was on screen with Omar Cuevas, who is one of our board members. And Omar kind of acted as the MC. And there was a lot of conversation back and forth. So Omar would ask Wendy a question, she would answer. There was a lot of commenting back and forth that really kept it kind of dynamic going on. We also really focused the conversation on some current events. So June 4 was kind of during the heart of the Black Lives Matter protests and movement around the country, and including a big event in Grand Rapids the weekend before our Spellabration. And so it was really on everyone's mind, particularly locally. So we made sure that our conversation not only reflected the experience of COVID and that reality, but we really wanted to make sure that the conversation reflected some of the social justice issues that we were facing and that that was on top of mind for everyone. So then we were able to really keep it learner focused as well, which is always our goal. But we had a video that we had done before COVID that we were going to show in person at Spellabration with one of our learners, a great professionally produced video that we were able to show. And then we also wanted to do something that was very current. So we did a video of one of our tutors whose learner had COVID. And this again was really early on. And the learner was hospitalized with COVID. He recovered well, thankfully. But the tutor really helped the learner navigate some of that experience in the hospital and with the medical bills and things like that. So what we did was record an interview with the tutor on Zoom. And then I used my very fledgling video editing skills to edit it into a 4-minute video that we could show during Spellabration. So I think that just goes to show that you can have a professionally produced video is great, but you can also just do it yourself if you are willing to learn to do some video editing, but you can really kind of focus on the stories that are happening now without having to get, a professional company involved. So in addition to that, I mean, you've heard me say it 100 times now, we kept the event live. So Wendy came live from her house and Omar came live from his house and I was at my house kind of manipulating everything behind the scenes. We could all see the Facebook comments as we went. So that was fun. It was like a fun way for Wendy and Omar to ask questions and to interact and to respond to what they were seeing in the chat. And then there was a way to pull in some of the comments onto the screen so everybody could kind of see what that looked like, which you can kind of see at the bottom of the screen here. We also used a text to give platform, so guests could text a donation to the Literacy Center, and we also kept posting the donate link in the chat. And then we had a live thermometer that tracked it throughout the night. So it ended up kind of having a an NPR telethon kind of focus, where, you know, Wendy and Omar could comment on how we were doing with fundraising. At one point, Omar said if we hadn't reached a certain goal, he would start telling dad jokes, and he did, and it went on for a while, but thankfully the fundraising kicked in. Nobody wanted to hear any more of Omar's dad jokes. So this is kind of how the event ended up. We were really pleased with the results. We had about 100 live views on Facebook, and then about 1.4 thousand after the event. So that was the beauty of putting it on Facebook, is that it was available after the event for people to watch. We were also able to download it and put it onto YouTube. So whoever, you know, if people couldn't see it on Facebook or weren't able to engage on Facebook, they were able to watch it on YouTube afterwards. So that was a really nice feature. We raised about $137,000. Again, some of that did come in kind of pre-COVID. Our sponsors, but we were, you know, in touch with our sponsors. They were all really generous, you know, happy to continue their giving, even though we moved the event virtually. We had one sponsor, which still shocks me, ask for their money back, which was just very odd, I thought. But, you know, we obliged, and they've since given again, so that's good. And then during the event, we raised about $25,000, which just blew us away. We had originally thought maybe 10,000 is a goal. We weren't sure. And then we were getting good donations in right before the event started. So at the very last second, I was like quickly changing our goal to 15,000. And you can see online, this is the thermometer, that we went over our goal. So we raised above 15,000, which was great. And then we had a number of donations come in kind of offline. We also had a matching donation from Fifth Third Bank, and that I think really helped drive donations as well. So this is all fantastic. We were so excited about the event and the result, and I said, please don't make me do a virtual event again. And then here we were in the fall with our wine and words. It was pretty clear that we needed to be virtual again in the fall. So we had some lessons learned between Spellabration and Wine and Words. This time we used the same systems, but we streamed the event live onto Facebook and YouTube so that people could engage in both locations. And we saw good engagement on both platforms, which was really great. And then one of the benefits of Wine and Words particularly is being in this beautiful home. It's kind of an iconic premier home in Grand Rapids that a lot of people know about. So we wanted to include elements of that in our virtual event. So Mark is our host. He's pictured here on the left, and is a former board member and current chair of our donor development committee. So he's really engaged in the work of the organization. And so he and Wendy on the right did the event, this live streaming from Mark's home. So you can kind of see his home in the background. They could talk about that a little bit. We also included photos of the house as Mark kind of told a bit of the history. So, you know, we wanted to kind of give people the feel of being there as best we could, recognizing that we weren't a professional production company. And so we had to kind of figure it out ourselves. At this event, we did sell tickets. So everybody could still attend, you know, watch on Facebook or YouTube, but if people wanted a little extra treat, they could buy a ticket and get a delivery of a gift bag. So we delivered a bottle of wine and a little box of appetizers to anybody who purchased a ticket, and to our sponsors. And the little box of appetizers were from the caterer that we normally would have if we had an in-person event. So that was a nice touch, and we definitely had some people take us up on it. And then one of the unique things about Wine and Words is that we do a pre-event for our major donors every year. So from about 4:30 to 6 before Wine and Words starts, we do a wine tasting for just our top donors, which is a nice little networking thank you event. And so what we did for this year for virtual Wine and Words was we invited our major donors to Mark's house to do an outdoor wine tasting the same evening. So that was going on outside while we were quickly ran inside to do the virtual event, and then went back out and drank some wine. So that was a nice way to kind of tie the two together. I'm not sure I would do it the same way again. I think one of the lessons we learned is that we missed out on having some of our major donors watch the event because they were having way too much fun drinking wine out in the beautiful sunshine in the evening. And we also, I think, missed out on some of their donations. I think if they had watched the live event, we maybe would have gotten some donations from them. But still, I think they really enjoyed it, and everybody enjoyed, you know, having a 15 to 20 person outdoor event in this fall. So you can see I just kind of gave a quick picture of the results over the past few years. This was our most successful Wine and Words yet, which just blew us all away. And I think we had some really generous sponsors, both individuals and companies. I think with all of our events this year, and maybe you guys are noticing the same thing, is that individuals, some of our, you know, individual donors are really doing well during COVID. They've kept their jobs, they're working from home. They're not doing, you know, major trips. They're not eating out. They're not, you know, purchasing that new car. So they have a little bit more disposable income. And we were really lucky to be kind of the generous recipients of that throughout our events. I think we kind of saw that in the giving for our events. In general, we had about 75 live views. We were competing with beautiful fall weather in Michigan, one of those like last really beautiful nights. So I do think that that reduced some of our live views, but what can you do? It's Michigan in the fall. Everybody wants to be outside before it gets cold. We raised about $46,000, including about $8,000 during the live event. So really happy with those numbers. So this is kind of like deja vu, but I said, great, we're done with virtual Wine and Words. Now we have to plan virtual Spellabration for 2021 because it was obvious, you know, we wanted to hold the event in March and we knew that we weren't going to be in person. So this time, to kind of save my sanity, we decided to do use a production company. So Spellabration of 2021 was held on March 18, so just a couple of weeks ago. So I'm still kind of recovering, but all went well. And we worked with a production company called 730 Eddy Studios. I will put in a plug for them because they work around the country and were fantastic. So they set up essentially a studio at the Literacy Center so we could go live, but had, you know, beautiful cameras, a teleprompter, which was great for Wendy and Omar. You know, Wendy had previously tried to like kind of tape up her script next to the camera and go back and forth. And it was just, you know, I think for her it was kind of a logistical nightmare. So really nice that we could use the production company. They also did all of the behind the scenes tech, like manipulating photos and videos and things like that. And we had a lot of stuff, you know, kind of popping up during the event. So as Wendy and Omar were talking about specific things, we had photos to show to illustrate that. So for us, it was really worth the money because it freed me up to do more fundraising and, you know, less 60-hour weeks, which was great. We also did, again, ticket sales with a gift bag, and you can see a picture on the right of all of our gift bags stacked up around the office. This time we learned our lesson. So the gift bags for Wine and Words, we did that appetizer box, but the appetizers needed to be refrigerated. And so that's kind of a logistical nightmare when you're delivering those all over Grand Rapids and you have to make sure that people are home to put it in the refrigerator and use coolers. And our staff managed it really well, but it was chaos. And so this time we learned our lesson. So our gift bags this time were from a local shop, and they had your choice of red or white wine, non-alcoholic drinks, or a beer. So we had those plus snacks, and then we added the printed program for everybody that received a gift bag and Scrabble tiles so that they could play the Scrabble game if they got a gift bag. So that kind of incentivized getting a bag. And so we sold quite a number of individual tickets, but then also, you know, certain sponsorship levels came with a certain number of gift bags. So our staff ended up delivering 162 bags all over West Michigan, which was just a feat unto itself. And I commend them and so appreciate them for doing that. A couple of the other kind of fun things that we did, we had a signature cocktail, again, partnering with our friends At Lawn Road Distillers this year, they had time to put together a signature cocktail called the Scrabble. And bonus points if you know what book that's from. It's right out of the BFG by Roald Dahl. And so they created a signature drink, and they bottled that or canned it and were selling it from the distillery. So the proceeds came from those cans came back to the Literacy Center. And then Lawn Road and our production company also recorded a video on how to make your own Scrabble. So we could show that during our cocktail hour. So both elements were just kind of fun ways of recognizing that partnership. And then if you remember, in 2020, we postponed our honoree celebration thinking we would absolutely be back in person in 2021. That did not happen. So instead, what we did were very small receptions for each of our honorees. So we held 3 receptions for each honoree, and they could invite 10 to 12 guests. So we kept it, very small, socially distanced celebration where they could receive the award. We could present them with the award in the company of their friends or their family or the people that, really mattered to them. So that was kind of a fun way to recognize our honorees. We also did a tribute video, which we had actually recorded in, the winter of 2020 before everything shut down. And so we were able to show that video at each of the receptions, but also show it during the live event and kind of show some of the pictures from the reception. So it was a way to kind of tie that in and recognize our great honorees. So all went really well. I'm happy to report we ended up with about 120 live views. It was interesting to me, they were pretty evenly split between Facebook and YouTube. So people were engaging on both platforms. On Facebook, there was quite a conversation going. So there were 241 comments during the event, which was great. We kind of planted board and staff to kind of initiate and engage in conversations, but it was amazing how many people who were watching the event just kind of wanted to keep up a conversation during the event. So we were asking questions and engaging and having a lot of fun with that. So I think that's a really neat way to show engagement from the event. We raised about $105,000, but actually we just got notification today of another $5,000 gift. So better late than never, I'll take it. So we're actually at about 110 total of the event. So that's dollars raised during the event itself, plus money that came in beforehand. And so during the event itself, we raised about $12,000. You can see on the right our thermometer, which was a lot of fun and made it really fun and interesting to track. And we almost got to our $10,000 goal during the event itself, but then we got some great offline donations from people. And again, we had that matching donation from Fifth Third Bank. And I think that really drives some individual giving, particularly at the smaller levels. We had a number of donors ask, like, I want to make sure that my gift gets matched. Can you please confirm that, this amount of money is going to get matched? So I think there really is a lot of value to having a matching donation. So that's kind of how we ended with Spellabration of 2021. The big question, the $1 million question is like, what's next? Where do we go from here? And I wish I had the answers. I would totally attend that webinar on what do we do next. But, I think what we're looking at is making sure Wine and Words is early enough in the season in Michigan that it can be outdoors. So we're looking at doing it probably in early September as an outdoor event, because I think even then, even once people are starting to get vaccinated and feel a little bit more comfortable, I still think being inside with large groups is going to take a while for people to get comfortable with again. So, we might start looking at smaller receptions. I wonder if the days of the 350, 400 person gala are done. I don't know about you, but in Grand Rapids, gala season can be really intense, and there can be multiple in one night or multiple in a week, and it can just be kind of exhausting to run that circuit. So, I wonder if those are going to come back in the same way. I think no matter what, at least for us, there will be some virtual element to our events so that people that aren't able to get away, aren't able to get, childcare or pay the full price of a ticket, can still engage in the event some way or another. So I think we're kind of already talking with our production company about what does that look like going forward for some virtual elements. And this year we really saw in some cases, a move away from event sponsorships. So some companies and also individuals were like, we really want to support you, but we don't care about the event. We don't care about getting our name on the screen. We will support you in other ways. So I don't know if that's kind of a COVID thing or if that's going to continue. I'd be beginning to think that's going to continue a little bit. And so that our fundraising approach may need to be a little bit different moving forward in terms of how do we recognize some of these sponsors, some of these donors without it being tied to an event. So I think there's still a lot of questions out there, but that's kind of what I'm looking at going forward. And with that, I am done. So I will take any questions you have. I know that was a lot of information all at once.
Great. Excuse me. Great. Thank you, Libby. We do have one question. I'm going to encourage people to type in your questions into the Q&A box, and I have a couple of questions for you myself. But our first one is from Veronica, and she's just wondering how you at Literacy Center of West Michigan, how you guys define family literacy.
Oh, sure. So our family literacy program, we do classes with parents of children in the local school districts. So we partner with 3 local school districts and Head Start for Kent County, our local Head Start. And we do classes for parents whose children attend those schools. And we do them during the normal times, we do them right in the school building. And then we do family activity nights once a month at each location to bring the family together to do activities. So yeah, that's how we do it. And I'm happy to connect you with our family literacy director if you have more questions.
Oh, fantastic. We have another one from Quinn. How long did the Spellabration virtual event take in regards to planning?
Oh gosh. Well, it took from when we decided at the end of March until June 4. So it was a really quick kind of turnaround that time of in a real perfect world, you spend 8 or 9 months planning an event. And because we decided, at the end of March to go virtual, it was just a couple of months that we had to plan, and there was a lot to learn. I am not a tech person, so it was just a lot of trial and error to figure out what platforms were going to work and how they worked. We were having like technical difficulties with one thing right up until the last minute, and I had my husband involved, and we were trying to figure out all of this like tech stuff. So yeah, I really devoted most of those 2 months to kind of getting ready and figuring out. I had to learn how to do video editing, like who knew? That was part of my job description. So it was interesting.
And Libby, what about the 2021, planning for the 2021 event?
Yeah.
I mean, because it wasn't as kind of spur of the moment type of thing. So can you give us an idea of like that hopefully longer, more sensible planning process? And also like how much were you able to reuse from the first time you did it, and how much did you have to kind of rethink?
Yep, absolutely. So we probably started, so if, Spellabration 2020 ended, was in June, we probably started in August by picking a date at least for Spellabration 21. We weren't completely sure it was going to be virtual at that point. We kind of had an inkling, but didn't know for sure. So I would say, the planning was really September, was the start of the planning. But really it ramps up in, November, as we're starting to seek sponsorships. That's kind of our time frame to do sponsorship requests from November through January. It was actually a lot easier the second time around, I will admit. And having the production company for us, or for me, was worth every penny. I'm a one-person development department, probably like a lot of you out there. I have great support from our executive director and from an executive assistant for the organization, but otherwise it's me. So, you know, all of my time spent trying to figure out video editing means time I'm not doing some direct fundraising. So using the production company really made a difference because I wasn't trying to scramble to figure out that technology. And, you know, our assistant took on the gift bag process, which was amazing, and just handled that and took care of, you know, tracking down addresses and getting those all delivered. Our executive director and I worked very closely together on the script, and we were able to reuse kind of at least the general flow of it from the first time around. So obviously the content was updated, but we knew kind of what worked and how the conversation would go. So yeah, the second time around is always easier. I will say that. And even going from Spellabration virtually to Wine and Words virtually, just having learned the platform alone was a huge help.
And Libby, you've talked a little bit about the production company. So I want to ask some follow-up questions about
Yeah.
that. And you've shared a link to their website, and you've recommended them. You say they do work all around the country, but
Mm-hmm.
can you talk to us a little bit about just how you found them, kind of what they brought to the, you know, to the table in terms of being able to help you out, and then a little bit about like the cost range of roughly kind of if someone was thinking about using a production company, like
Mm-hmm.
so they can get a financial picture of what that would be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those were all questions that we had going in. We had no idea how this worked. You know, the first two events we did with like me and a crappy old laptop in my office at home. So we were like, who knows what this production company is going to bring to the table. So we found them. I found them by watching a lot of virtual events and finding out which ones I liked and which ones looked really professional, and then tracking down who they worked with. You know, I knew they weren't just doing it on an old laptop in their office. So that's how I found 730 Eddy Studios, was because they had done an Association of Fundraising Professionals event here locally, and it looked really polished. And I assumed from the very beginning that we wouldn't be able to afford them. You know, their level of professionalism that I could see in this other virtual event. I was like, oh, there's no way our budget will allow. But they ended up costing just a little over $3,000, which for us was a really good, reasonable amount. They helped us. So they did the Long Road video in advance, and they did that for us, thankfully, at like a nice discounted rate. So that was a lot of fun. But they met with us multiple times to kind of set up the layout of the event. And I think they come into events usually having to do kind of the show flow where, you know, they identify what's most important, what goes where, and they're really kind of involved in that piece of it. I don't think they knew what they were getting when they met me. I'm very, I have my own systems and I have a very detailed show flow down to like, you know, the minute. So I could essentially hand over, this is what I'm thinking in terms of the flow of the event, and they could plug it into their system. So that worked really well. But if I wasn't as neurotic as I am, I think they would have done a lot of kind of helping us figure out where things go and how to prioritize it. And then they were here the day of the event. So they set up the studio for us. I would say it took them about 3 hours to set up just the lighting and the cameras. So they were very detailed about it. And then they had an entire, I wish I had the picture to show everybody, but they had, you know, an entire like tech setup in our kitchen in our building, where they were like running multiple computers and could manipulate everything. So it was worth the cost for us for peace of mind. I think if I did it again, they were a little too slick. So the image that you got of the event was maybe that it was pre-produced. It didn't have kind of some of that like gritty live piece of it that I think sometimes you can tell when something's live. So I think if we did it again, I would make sure that there was conversation about it being live, and some, real-time comments and things like that. But otherwise, we were really happy with them, and, thought the cost was reasonable given the fact that we weren't paying for a venue. We weren't paying for, we would be paying for AV at a venue anyway. So we were saving some money that way.
I think that's a good way of looking at it, especially for a virtual event, that your venue costs and your AV costs are getting transferred over to production costs.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah, we found that, I don't know if this is helpful for anybody else, but we found that our costs were a little less than half of what they would be for an in-person event. So virtually, with paying for, the gift bags that people purchased, and the AV and the printing and some of the stuff that still has to happen, we still we're at about half of what it would be for an in-person event.
Okay. And then we have a question from Steve. Did the virtual events attract any new donors who had not been to or given at in-person events?
Yes, that was the coolest part. Thanks for that question. Particularly Spellabration the first time around, because I think virtual events were still pretty new at that point, and people weren't sick of them yet. Not that they could ever get sick of ours, but they're people are getting a little more used to them. But the first Spellabration, we saw so many donations come in from people we didn't know. And as a fundraiser, that's so exciting. So people were, sharing the link out with a bunch of different people. And the same thing happened to a little lesser extent, but this time around for Spellabration as well. I think it's a really easy ask to say, hey, why don't you tune in for 30 minutes while you're cooking dinner, or, while the kids are playing, tune in and watch this event. So yeah, we saw quite a few new donors with both events. And we also, I really appreciated that we saw, tutors engaging in ways that they probably wouldn't necessarily in an in-person event. We had learners engaging in both events, commenting and watching, and that was really fun, and something that we wouldn't necessarily be able to have at an in-person event where a ticket is, $110. So yeah, that was kind of the best part about being virtual, is that it was such a wider audience.
And then you've added those new contacts into your donor list and all of that, so they get integrated into your kind of larger fundraising mechanisms.
Absolutely, you better believe it.
Fantastic. And Libby, while we're waiting for other people to type in questions, you mentioned that you kind of to learn how to do a virtual event, you just attended a bunch of them, right? Tell us a little bit about that, kind of some of the things you picked up on, how beneficial that was.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think I watched every virtual event in a 30-mile radius and beyond. So yeah, we really learned, what I liked and what I didn't like about it. That's how I found this Be Live platform, was that, one of my colleagues at another organization did one of the very first virtual events, and she was using a consultant that suggested the platform. And so, I think what's neat locally here is that we have a really strong development fundraising community across organizations and across nonprofits. And so that group is really engaged in helping and supporting each other. So there are a lot of, there's a Facebook group where you can ask questions like, what kind of platforms work, or what would you recommend for a production company, or are you guys doing a virtual event? There was a lot of conversation about that early on. So yeah, I found some of the things I found that I didn't like were the TV personalities. As great as they were on camera, it just didn't feel like they had a strong connection to the mission, which was really important for us. We didn't like the ones that were pre-recorded, even though I'm sure that's it's a lot easier to pre-record. And for some organizations early on, it might've been the only option. I totally get that. It just wasn't kind of what we wanted to do. So we really liked the events that were live, that had a lot of engagement. And for me, and maybe this is true for everyone else, but I really wanted it to be brief. We, our entire team, because you can get on these and you're like, how long is this thing going to go? Like, how much more are they going to talk about the wine that they're drinking? It doesn't really matter. So we knew we really wanted to keep it short and sweet and get people in, get them a great taste of our mission, get them laughing a little, enjoying themselves, and then get them out and on with their lives. So especially in this virtual world where Zoom fatigue is real. And we had some people that did ask, like, oh, can you do it on Zoom so we can see other people? And I, as much as I appreciate the sentiment, I'm glad that we didn't, because I've been on some of those that are just a logistical nightmare. And I think some organizations can probably do it really well. But oh my gosh, the chaos of having all of those people on one screen and trying to do breakouts and all of that just wasn't in the cards for us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's all of my questions. I appreciate the fact that I get to ask questions too, and that seems to be all of the questions we have from the folks that attended. So,
Great.
Libby, I think we're going to do what a lot of people like and let people out a few minutes early.
Yeah.
And let me just say thank you so much for sharing your uh, two different fundraising events and what they were like in person, what they were like virtually, and kind of your experiences. We've all learned a lot. We've got some really good comments from what people have learned in the chat. And
Great.
let me say thank you for the people attending. And we've got about a month off, month and a half off until we've got our next round of fundraising webinars coming up in May. So keep a lookout for them. Keep a lookout for our other webinars. And let me say again, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week.
Thank you.